Hello, everybody. Is the stream live? Let's see if it is live. Yes, it looks like it's live. It worked. I've never done this before with, just myself. Hello, can people hear me? Am I on? I want to make sure that this is working. Yes, it looks like it's working. All right. Welcome to a special emergency episode of Roll for Combat Live. A emergency episode that I am streaming. I'm not Steven. Steven's not here. He's at Gen Con right now. And so I got it set up to stream as not the owner of the channel. And it looks like everything is working. So thanks for joining us here. This is an emergency episode because Starfinder 2 is coming, and it's using the Pathfinder 2 rules. So that is huge. That's huge for Roll for Combat. That is huge for Paizo. That is huge for players. That's huge for GMs. That's huge for all of us. And so I wanted to talk about all of the implications, and we can take a look together at the document that's on Starfinder playtest, the playtest doc, and that will allow us to analyze and read some things into it that we can discover together. So first off, let's talk about the overall implications of the decision to make Starfinder 2 use Pathfinder 2 rules. Well, for one, I think that is the best possible choice that could have been made about how to deal with updating to a new edition for Starfinder. By creating compatibility between Pathfinder 2e and Starfinder, it means you'll be able to use things back and forth between the two systems. They said it's going to be fully compatible. Now, obviously, Starfinder has some different assumptions than Pathfinder does, and even in the field test doc, we can see that there are some things in here that are more towards Starfinder's assumptions of ranged attacks being pretty much ubiquitous, and of creatures being flying a lot. Flying, I think we can't be sure just yet, but given everything that's in there, I think it's pretty unlikely that Starfinder is going to change the sort of the meta of flying and ranged attacks. There's a few other meta differences in Starfinder to begin with, which we can't really say with anything that we've seen in the field test document. For example, in the meta of Starfinder, the Starfinder 1, the original Starfinder, there was a big discussion that happened with the team that was building Starfinder, which included the eventual Starfinder team and also the design team. So the process of Starfinder First Edition was that some elements of the chassis were worked on by the design team first, while the lore was being worked on by the Starfinder team. Then the Starfinder team worked on everything. Then Logan and I kind of got pulled back in to do a lot more math crunching and design later on in the process. So I was heavily involved in Starfinder First Edition. And one of the interesting discussions in Starfinder First Edition, which we don't know if that'll change or stay the same in Second Edition, but is one of the few differences in assumptions from Pathfinder, is that spells and environmental suits that protect you from pretty much everything that can possibly happen to you in an environment were decided in Starfinder First Edition to be kind of ubiquitous and easy to access. And so this was a pretty big discussion that happened, and there was opinions all over through the directions about well, this takes out your ability to have stories about how the environment is a problem, but on the other hand, there was a core idea that some of the packed worlds were so poisonous or difficult to go into without those abilities being fundamental, that if they weren't fundamental, then you couldn't go to those packed worlds to at level 1 And then the question was, well, is that okay? Maybe this pack world should be higher level. Oh, but what if we want to tell stories in those worlds? They're part of the core setting. It was a large discussion, and it had great points on both sides. So that's something that can stay the same or change. Where we don't really know. But if they do, that plus the ranged flying dichotomy are probably going to be two of the questions of whether the meta is a little bit adjusted. But let me tell you this. Even if those metas are slightly different, that doesn't mean the two systems won't be compatible. That's still completely compatible. You could just put like a note on the side that says, hey, you know what? These slight things are different in the meta. And to offer an example of just how powerful this compatibility should be, and looking at this soldier document, it really seems that that they're really keeping it completely compatible, except for possibly with these metas. Let's discuss some role for combat products that we're putting out, like Ancestries for the Year of Monsters, or Dragons. Battlezoo Ancestries Dragons. So what would we need to do to make Battlezoo Ancestries Dragons, one of our most popular products, compatible with Starfinder 2nd Edition, just fully, completely compatible with Starfinder 2nd Edition, and taking into account if the meta has shifted? The answer is, it would be extremely easy. You could use it right out of the box, and I don't think you would have any problems from what I'm seeing here. There would be certain abilities in Battlezoo Ancestries Dragons that like maybe would be easier to replicate with Starfinder material if Starfinder has more ranged weapons and flying at lower levels. So you'd be like, well, maybe I don't want to take the flying abilities and the ranged attack abilities from the Dragon book, or I can just take the ones from Starfinder, which is totally like you don't have to do anything. Maybe we could potentially release like a short, like few paragraph conversion document that's not even a conversion document, but that is like a sidebar that's like things to take into account if you're going into Starfinder, because it's not a conversion, it's completely compatible. And in that document we could say, well, in Starfinder, making some assumptions based on what we can see here, that they're going to keep it like Starfinder 1 in this meta. Ranged attacks and flying are like all around, even at low levels. So if you're using this for Starfinder, maybe then change the dragon flying feats so that the one at 9th level that gives you flying for a while is whatever level makes sense for the Starfinder 2nd Edition meta. 1st level, whatever it is. And the one that gives you constant flying is, well, again, whatever level makes sense for the Starfinder meta. I'll say 5th level. I'm making these up. We're going to need to see the final rules at that point and be like, and that's it. And you don't have to make that change. If you don't, it just means that the dragons will probably get jetpacks or other Starfinder flying options instead of using the ones from the Pathfinder flying options. So that, I think, will make it really, really nice, really elegant, super easy to put in that document that I just described. And I think even without that document, it's just going to be completely fine. And if you went backwards from Starfinder into Pathfinder 2nd Edition, then it would be in the same way. You could put a disclaimer. Starfinder is heavy on ranged weapons and flying, and maybe things that protect against environments. We don't know that until we see what they're doing here. There's no indication in the soldier of which way they're going, and so therefore, if you're using this in Pathfinder 2, consider the fact that the flying should be moved up to a higher level or something like that. That is so tiny of a consideration that you would have to make, and this just is going to allow you to get everything from Starfinder 2nd Edition and Pathfinder 2nd Edition and use them back and forth between the two of them. And it lets you use some of the other fun ideas that are in there too. Like, I'm going to go through the entire field test doc and make some analysis, but like things like the glitching condition. While it's meant to be that it's based on tech glitching, It says it's like for if you're a technological creature or using technological items. You could use the glitching condition for someone who creates like glitches in reality in Pathfinder 2nd Edition and use the mechanics of the glitching condition very, very easily at that point. And there's also a suppressed condition for someone who's under suppressing fire. And you could create like a magical suppressing fire ability in Pathfinder 2nd Edition to use the suppressed condition there. So there's just going to be a ton that you can take back and forth between the two games to mix and match. Even if you're not even fully bringing in Starfinder levels of technology into Pathfinder, you can use the mechanics from it. It looks like from this document, I can see how to use those mechanics just in Pathfinder 2nd Edition to begin with if I wanted to. And in the things that would be technological, you could turn them into a special specific weapon that's like a magic item if very, very easily. That was at whatever the particular item level is that the weapon was at. You'd be just like, yeah, you know, instead of this being a roto laser, right? It can be a magical flame launching rod or something like that you hold in both hands. So maybe like a giant staff, and it says it has 20 charges, right? So it charges up mystically. So, and I think I see how you could use Starfinder 2nd Edition and Pathfinder 2nd Edition stuff, even if you're playing in a Pathfinder 2e game that doesn't have room for super high-tech versions of everything that's out there. So this is just a paradigm shift in the way that we think about how these two games interact. And maybe we should take our thoughts about this paradigm shift further, right? Because now that you have Starfinder 2nd Edition, you have Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you could have other systems or games that come out if a third party wanted to do it or if Paizo wanted to do it that also were compatible, right? You could make a superhero finder that also was compatible with or like a modern finder, and you could bring them in and just have like, you know, your wizard is playing in a game that also has a soldier from Starfinder and a superhero from a superhero finder of some kind, and they're all like teaming up to fight against some kind of cosmic threat. So this is a shift that is it's more like GURPS or some of the other systems where you can just, you know, mix and match multiple systems across genres together, and less like something like Powered by the Apocalypse or Forged in the Dark, which are ideas from indie RPGs where you use the core mechanic that is behind the game to make an entirely new game, which may not be compatible. So what I mean by that is, if this was like Forged in the Dark or Powered by the Apocalypse, then Starfinder 2e in that case might use the 3-action economy and the 4 degrees of success, but just be a completely different game that had its own economies of like bonuses and expectations, maybe like different bonus types, things like that. But that's not what they're doing, and that's what's so amazing. What they're doing is instead going for full transparency, other than, it seems like, obviously, like the setting conceits of, well, these are high-tech weapons, your old weapons are archaic. Obviously, if you use them together, the ones that are not archaic, because of the archaic weapon rules in the doc, have an advantage against the ones that are. But you could also easily remove those archaic rules if you wanted to use full transparency between them without giving the high-tech stuff an advantage. Just like from a story perspective, it makes sense that the high-tech weapons would have an advantage due to the fact that, well, you know, it's thousands of years in the future. Hopefully, you know, when they came up with all these new ideas, they didn't make it just equal to these like flintlock muskets from before, right? So those archaic rules cause it to make sense in the world, but you could just remove those if you didn't care about that that narrative beat, and you just were like, yeah, I know, it makes no sense that a laser pistol and a flintlock musket are equally good, but I don't really want to have to design something, potentially, like you're a home GM, and you just want to let someone play with things like directly from both games without worrying about it. There's going to be ways that you can do that with just such minimal effort, that this is going to allow you to do some really wild stuff. So I see a question in chat about Starfinder 2 dropping EAC and KAC from Starfinder 1. So I think that dropping EAC and KAC is just very important and necessary for full compatibility. I think it's going to be okay. It was interesting to have more toggles on armor to make armor that was like very different from each other, because this one's very energy. So EAC and KAC, for anyone watching who is not familiar with Starfinder 1 rules, is energy and kinetic weapon armor class that were different for each armor. And usually kinetic AC was higher because energy, it was harder to block. But you could have a weird armor that was just terrible against bullets, but had like an energy field and was really good against energy weapons. Just really interesting ability to mix it up on armor. But I think that it's much more important to keep compatibility than to add in that extra toggle. And that also, like, the game of whether to target KC or EAC is something that could have very large consequences in Pathfinder 2 if you were to try to bring it in and be like, well, okay, these things and only these things have it now. First of all, you don't know what the ACs are for Pathfinder monsters. You could say they're equal unless stated otherwise. But I think it's just easier to create a bespoke condition, for example, if you wanted to do that in your game, where you just make the creature be off guard against energy attacks or kinetic attacks if they're meant to be bad at defending against energy attacks or kinetic attacks. That way, also, you can describe what it means to be an energy attack or kinetic attack. And in this case, you're like, they're off guard against any attack that like deals energy damage, which also would include like a scorching ray. You could put things in there like that without adding a new term like EAC and KAC. So that's going to be my answer to the question in chat from Raven. So basically, this is going to be huge, and it's going to make it. It's going to make lots of possibilities. You know, Roll for Combat, when Steven first started Roll for Combat as a podcast, before we made any products, before anything else, it was a podcast for Starfinder first. And it started with playing Starfinder Adventure Path, and then I think the first published product that Roll for Combat put out was like like some kind of a random loot box item for Starfinder. I should look it up, by Thurston Hillman. Loot Box of Wonder. That's like the Rod of Wonder, but with loot boxes for Starfinder, right? So we're very excited at Roll for Combat. Steven's at the convention and is freaking out about just putting out content that's going to be compatible for Starfinder 2nd Edition as well as Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So definitely going to look into that, and I can imagine like now our like cerebrophages, which are a type of creature we're putting out in Year of Legends, our new upcoming year with 12 ancestries, that are like, if you take a Pathfinder Incutilis, those little nautilus that attaches to your head and kills you and then puppets you. But sometimes they wind up symbiotically connecting to the person who they're on their head, and they turn into a nautilus-headed creature. And I can just imagine those cerebrophages like flying around in Starfinder, in addition to being in Pathfinder. They in particular feel like a very an ancestry that would be very, very popular in Starfinder. So I'm seeing a super chat from Radio New Vegas Live that says, what do you think about possible future 3-action spaceship rules in Starfinder 2 and using them for normal ships in Pathfinder 2? I was going to bring that up, Radio New Vegas Live, as a complete speculation. So I'm glad you asked that question, because I think it's a huge opportunity to use the victory point system in certain ways, to create a starship combat sort of subsystem using maybe more various kinds of victory points potentially. Obviously, your ships have actual hit points, so it's not going to be exactly a victory point subsystem, but where you're using skills and different abilities on that. And I actually do think that if they make something like that, you probably can just sort of like, erase around the edges some of the things about it being spaceships to make a naval combat rule system for like normal ships. Obviously, if there's things about like using the computers to target their like shielding frequencies and also like scan for enemy vessels, it might be weird. You might need to be like, well, then in that case, you have to have a spellcaster who's like using whatever isn't divination. It's like scrying effects. It wouldn't be divination since those don't exist anymore in the remaster. So scrying and prediction effects to figure out where the enemies will go. But I think there's huge potential for that, and I think it's going to it could be really, really great. Mostly Harmless made a follow-up for my ideas about getting the feel of kinetic and energy AC, saying that you could have armor specialization effects that are about energy instead of, because all the armor specialization effects in Pathfinder armor types, right, are giving you resistance to like bludgeoning or slashing or piercing. But you could easily make like a thermal suit that it protects you against like heat and cold, potentially, if you know how to use it completely well, and that then its armor specialization is resistant to fire and cold instead, right? You could totally put that into the game. So that is absolutely true, Mostly Harmless. Let's see. There's also a super chat from Cheese of Ages that says, I'm a little skeptical of PF2 marshals having access to energy weapons. Given how common physical resist is, that seems like free extra damage. So having access to energy weapons definitely seems like it's a very powerful boon to add on. On the other hand, it could be an expensive one if you're keeping up to date with a maxed out energy weapon and a maxed out physical weapon. And energy weapons are one of the only things where you could wind up being like, oh my goodness, this creature is immune to my energy weapon. So if your only weapon was an energy weapon, then you're doing great against the physical resist creatures, but you might wind up being hard countered against a energy immune creature and then have to like completely switch up. Now, if you pick one of the energy types that has almost no immunities, sure, that's definitely an advantage that you would see coming in. So I think there's definitely going to be places where you're going to want to like look at it a little bit when you're bringing it in and be like, am I sure I want to give this to my PF2 characters, or am I sure I want to give this PF2 thing to my Starfinder characters? But to be honest with you, that's true with any new product. I find that to be the case. If you're really doing best practices, then no matter how skilled a group of freelance authors and in-house authors and developers and designers are, speaking as someone who's been the designer, who's been working on the game a lot, design manager, no matter how skilled the group is, we always let a few interactions through, even if we're someone who specializes in trying to memorize like all of the diverse products and small rules that are out, and thinking of the implications of the interactions. Like, that's definitely something that in my toolkit that I think I specialize in. And nobody can catch everything. I think you should always be paying attention to small interactions. But I don't think it's going to be necessarily like that much more for Starfinder products than it would be if you just took any new product. And I know that people sometimes like to have like try to do an easier version of where you don't have to like examine carefully any new thing, and you're just like, I'll let it in sight unseen if it is X kind of product. If it is, some people, like if it's in the rulebook line for Paizo, or if Paizo wrote it, or some people will do it like sight unseen only if it's Pathfinder 2, but not if it's Starfinder 2. Some people will, or sight unseen but not for third-party products, or third-party products only counting Battlezoo from Roll for Combat, or other third-party companies that they trust. Everyone draws the line somewhere, I think that the best line to draw is one, if you have the time and mental energy to look at it, is one where you examine everything carefully, no matter where you find it. And that, to me, I think, from what I'm seeing in this Starfinder document, which we will get into once we've gone through this overview and all these questions, is that I don't think you're going to have to put that much more looking into it for just things like you did there, Cheese of Ages, than you would just for any Pathfinder product if you're looking at interactions and unusual things that are coming on. People in chat are also pointing out anything from Starfinder is definitely going to be at least uncommon, probably all rare if in Pathfinder anyway. So it's always going to be something that you're going to be thinking about more. And Dustin, Starfinder developer Dustin said best use of session 0, right? So that's a great use of session 0. Talk to your players about things that they want to include, then look at them. Look at what the things that they're bringing in are, some of the main ideas, some of the possible combinations, and see if there are any unintentional interactions. That's true for bringing Starfinder 2 to your Pathfinder 2, Pathfinder 2 to your Starfinder 2, or if you don't mix and match, I think that's always true, because unintended stuff gets through. Paizo has been very good about that in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and I want to say I am very proud of the times that I found some of these things when I was there, and the amount of years we went through without having too many, like, absolutely ridiculous combinations. Because I have not seen, like, a system that published that much volume for that many years and didn't have that many things, right? But they're always going to come up, and they're always going to be added on, kind of like barnacles onto a hull. That's just how things work. So I think that Starfinder 2 is not going to be any more of an addition to that natural process of an addition than just Pathfinder 2 in general, and that this is going to be an amazing way to get content that you can bring back and forth between the two and do exciting new things. So let me checking chat to see if there's any other thoughts here. People are talking about the fact that since it's probably going to be rare to use things across editions, it'll be a GM permission anyway. Honestly, everything is, like, technically at GM permission, but the rarity system was created so that you could generally trust things that were common, so that you didn't have to pay as much attention to them, because designers and developers tried to pay attention to things that were weird to exist in the world because they were just not found a lot, or had mechanics that could cause you some potential issues or be hard to work around, and put those traits on them. And I think obviously bringing something like from however many tens of thousands of years in the future back into the past is the kind of thing that would be rare and that you would be always talking about. But I think even common things can sometimes wind up being something that you might need to talk about, but they are ones that you can usually not pay as much attention to and just kind of put in. So let's see. I think that we've gone through all of the comments in here, and I've discussed a lot of the preamble that I wanted to talk about here. And we even talked about Starship Combat, which I had been wanting to bring up, but Radio New Vegas Live asked the question. So let's dig into this lovely field test document. So we've got in this document, there is an introduction that kind of explores the philosophy behind what is going to be going on in the Starfinder playtest. And it also has a vertical slice from level 1 to 5 of Soldier. Now, this 5-level vertical slice of Soldier is super similar to what you might have seen if you saw alpha material from Pathfinder 2nd Edition. As we've discussed before at Paizo in length when we were trying to talk about what was going to be going on, what had been going on in the Paizo offices. The 4 core classes, I don't know how many people have paid attention to this, were passed around by the design team. each member of the design team came up with the first 5 levels for one of the classes, and then the second 5 levels for another class. And then it kind of got a little bit chaotic at that point, and like I was writing a lot of spells that I think didn't get around to the wizard during that early stage or something like that, and then may have done multiple other classes. It wasn't an exact perfect pass around, but it was perfect for the first 2 stages at very least, because we had 4 classes and 4 designers. And so each time it was passed around, 5 more levels were added to the class, and also there were like revisions and refinements of what we had so far. So, right? So like the first 5 levels of fighter, it was just kind of in there as the fighter, and it attacked things. Then, it passed around, and it had some cool abilities. I think even a sudden charge type ability was in there from the start. It passed around, and I put in some things during the second pass around that had like openers and finishers and things like that. And then it passed around to Stephen Radney McFarland to refine that into having presses, which are similar to what you see in the final fighter. And it just kept changing each time by doing these 5-level vertical slices of the core classes in Pathfinder 2. And that looks like exactly what they're doing in Starfinder, the difference being that we get a peek into the process at the point in time when it's at the 5-level process, which is a pretty early point. For Pathfinder 2, there's no way we could have given a peek at that point, because there were a lot of even like components of the entire rules system that didn't exist at the point in time when the classes only had 5 levels. Whereas here, since they're using Pathfinder 2nd Edition as the compatible system, everything else in the system other than the Starfinder parts do exist. And so having 5 levels of the class, we can take a look at it ourselves. So you can go to downloads.paizo.com/starfinder_field_test_1.pdf. I'll put it into the chat. If it's still completely denial of service on the page, this is where it seems to be. And there's a field test document here, which has the first 5 levels of the soldier class, followed by, in case you want to test that, it has like a few statements about equipment, which are actually some of the most interesting things in the document, are the statements about equipment and the example equipment. And then a computer glitch gremlin and a laser wolf are at the end, so you can fight against a computer glitch gremlin and a laser wolf over and over again, or just like anything from Pathfinder 2, right? So taking a look, going through here, when we have this soldier, its key attribute is Constitution, which means that this is going to have so many hit points. It's also a 10 plus Constitution modifier class, so it's going to have so many hit points. It's trained in Perception, not Expert, and is expert in Fortitude, but not the other saves, and is good at Intimidation. It's trained in Intimidation, and then if we look at its chart, at 3rd level, it gets to use Constitution instead of Charisma on Intimidation checks. Now, this is a very unusual decision compared to Pathfinder 2nd Edition classes. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, universally, any time that you're going to put a stat swap into a class, you'll see this on some of the classes. The stat swap comes in either at 1st level or at the same time as as you can possibly get the thing with the stat swap. Because here with Soldier, there's an interesting situation where you wind up that if you want to be intimidating and you don't care about diplomacy or deception and the like, you really don't want to put up your charisma at all. But if you don't, then in the first 2 levels, you definitely have intimidation, and you're very, very bad at it. And then starting at level 3, you become incredibly, incredibly good at it. So that is actually interesting, and I wonder if that means that we might see certain other things in Starfinder that I don't necessarily expect or that we don't know yet. So we also see that in the soldier class, we are trained in all armor and in simple and martial weapons. So simple and martial weapons and advanced weapons are going to be the the names used here, probably. Honestly, advanced weapons were a Starfinder terminology to begin with, because exotic weapons is kind of a pretty icky name for that category of weapons that is not even really accurate that they're exotic. It's that they're more powerful to begin with. So we've got the typical same things you would see for a Pathfinder class with during combat encounters, social encounters, and exploring in downtime. And you might, and others probably think about you, statements. So like others probably rely on you to take the lead and absorb incoming fire, because this is like the big, beefy class carrying the big, giant weapons. So at first level, it says ancestry and background, which we should expect. Like, we should expect they're not going to call it theme just to keep it like what it was called in Starfinder. Honestly, Starfinder's themes were very similar to Pathfinder's backgrounds to begin with. And so just calling them backgrounds standardizes it. There was no way they were going to do it different than that, because that just allows you to use a Pathfinder background on your Starfinder character if you want. Or you could use the Pathfinder Rare Time Traveler background and be like, yeah, I time traveled from Golarion. There already is a Time Traveler background. And so we've got the initial proficiencies, as we would expect. And we've got attributes boost. They're exactly the ones that we would expect to see. Suppressing fire is actually listed as a class feature for the soldier. That if you make an attack with a weapon with the area trait, then creatures in the area that fail their save against your attack become suppressed. So that means the soldier class in particular is going to make you become suppressed. Now, this could either be a replacement for the suppressing fire action from Starfinder, or it's possible that it's a separate action for everybody else, but that soldier can just do it in addition to attacking at the same time, whereas others may have to like just kind of fire at random into the area, not hit the targets in order to suppress them, if you see what I mean. So that could be like an advantage for the soldier where they do both, or it could be that only soldiers are putting up suppressing fire. We are not sure yet. But it does have the new condition suppressed, which is something that you could consider using in your Pathfinder 2 game. Giving a circumstance penalty on attack rolls is not something that is necessarily as easy to pull off. And interestingly, it gives a circumstance penalty on attack rolls and a status penalty on speed. Now, normally a status penalty is something where it's like, if you get a status penalty on speed, it's like your body is literally like, your body is literally having its temperature go down, so you have become slower. Whereas like a circumstance penalty on speed is like, vines are attached to your legs now, and something that's on the outside or in the area, you're walking, and there's something in the circumstances of your situation that is not like inherent to your current status that is causing this. So, but it is interesting that it's a status penalty. It may be because there's other sort of fundamental circumstance penalties in Starfinder 2nd Edition that you would expect on speed, and they want suppressed to work together with it. Because in the same way that a circumstance penalty on attack rolls clearly makes sense for attack rolls and means it'll work together with frightening them if you have your intimidate, which your class definitely has and encourages you to do. So it also has a special ability called Primary Target, which again means maybe only soldiers have this special ability, where when you use an area of effect weapon or area of fire or auto fire action, you can make a ranged attack roll against a single creature that's either right next to the center or is the closest within the line or cone, instead of requiring them to make a save. And you can choose if there's multiple creatures that would work for that. And in that case, it looks like if you successfully hit the creature, it's suppressed rather than them failing their save. So it means that if you're dealing with a boss plus like mooks, and the boss is like highly good at reflex saves, right? And you're like, well, this is a problem because this boss is highly good at reflex saves, but I kind of want to use my area effect because of the fact that there's all of these mooks that I'm going to hit with it. You could select the boss as the primary target and target their AC, which is going to probably be easier to deal with than a boss with high reflex saves. Just forget it. I've dealt with bosses with high reflex saves, and I've gotten critically saved against a lot of times. So then there's soldier fighting styles, which have names that I remember from the Starfinder soldier. So there's Armor Storm here, which looks like it basically means you can just use your own area weapons on yourself without hitting yourself. And if you suppress a target, you gain massive resistance against all of their attacks. It specifically is resistance. It doesn't say resist all. It doesn't say resist to a type. It just says resistance. So against the attacks, I'm going to assume it's probably resist all or meant to be resist all, which if so, I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe it's meant to be like a new kind of resistance to attack so that if their damage is like a plasma that splits between two damage types, it doesn't apply twice. But I'm going to assume that's either resist all or is going to be clarified at some point. It's very powerful, even if it just gives you half your level all the time against their attacks. It's very cool for Armor Storm. If it gives you resist all and multi-type attacks, you get to resist multiple times. That's incredible, and it's especially good if you're fighting against someone in, like, using Pathfinder 1 weapons who have, like, multiple different runes with very many different damage types, because then you're going to resist all of it. Super cool. So the Bombard is the one that is going to use the big heavy gun to bombard with an area weapon. And so basically, this one is the first one you shoot yourself. And this one you shoot your allies. So your allies have an easier time dealing with your area effects because the DC is lower against them. And if enemies succeed against your area attack, they're still suppressed, even if they succeed, but not critically succeed. Now, importantly, this does not happen if you miss your attack against your primary target, because this is the area-focused one. So it could be a situation where it changes your mind whether you want to use the primary target ability. If you're a Bombard soldier, maybe you don't, because you have a higher chance to suppress them if you don't use primary target. So Close Quarters has two-handed weapon ability. So you can, when you strike with a two-handed weapon, you suppress the target with that weapon and gain Punitive Strike reaction, which looks like when a suppressed creature uses Manipulate or Move or leaves a square, basically you're going to smack them and disrupt move actions. So, yes, it looks like it disrupts only move. So, as far as I'm seeing with this, and I may have missed something here, it is substantially weaker than, Attack of Opportunity's new name in the remaster is, I can't remember. Whatever the new name is, I'll memorize it at some point. It looks substantially weaker because of the fact that it only works on suppressed creatures, and it does not disrupt a manipulate action. However, I mean, substantially weaker than, like, one of the best first level reactions in the game. It's still pretty good. And that definitely allows you to be using a melee weapon and doing something awesome. And then Walking Armory has the heaviest armor around as your feature. It looks like it lets you use Constitution instead of Strength for determining your medium or heavy army. So it will be interesting. I should probably scroll down to see if there's strength requirements on any of these weapons, like these big weapons, because that ability tells me that I really, really, really don't want to take strength on my soldier at all, unless I am either playing the melee version, or I have a strength requirement that is needed to carry some of these big weapons. So I'm not seeing a strength requirement on the big weapons. Starfinder 1E did have a strength requirement on the big weapons, and it partially was there for the same reason the strength requirements are in Pathfinder 2 on the armors, just to kind of give strength something to do. So because you can use your Constitution, which is your key ability score, and you get more bulk from Constitution as well, half your Constitution modifier. And let's see, yes, they reduce the amount of bulk you can carry before being encumbered by half your Constitution modifier, and your max carry bulk by your full Constitution modifier. It says by your Constitution modifier rounded up, which I think just means Constitution modifier. So It definitely lets you dump strength like more than any other class while still wearing very heavy armor. And it means that you probably, unless you want to use athletics or weapon, should definitely be dumping strength. Maybe there will be other rules that we haven't seen yet that put some strength requirements into weapons that you can't ignore. Or something like that, so that soldiers won't be like mainly like 8 strength or 10 strength if plus 0 or -1 with modifiers, unless so either -1 or plus 0 if they kind of get rid of the ability to take flaws. That remains to be seen. So then you get soldier feats, which look pretty cool. I'm probably not going to go through every single feat on the soldier, but because it doesn't reveal quite as much as looking at the chassis of the class does. Skill feats at the exact same time you would expect. We have the aforementioned fearsome bulwark ability at level 3, using your charisma modifier, or con instead of charisma, but only at 3rd level. That was a very interesting difference from any of these swaps in Pathfinder 2. Skill increases at exactly the same time. General feats, just when you expect. Ancestry feats, when you expect. Soldier weapon mastery is going to give you critical specialization, and expert in weapons, exactly when you would expect for a martial character. And so, I guess there's not a huge number of feats now that I'm looking at it, because it's a vertical slice, so we can probably look at those very quickly to see what they reveal about the game. So we've got pin down for an action where somebody made their save against your area effect, and you make them save again to see if they're going to be suppressed. So it gives you more chances to suppress creatures. A reaction quick swap, which lets you stow your weapon and draw another two-handed weapon, and or choose a set to be active when a creature moves adjacent to you. That one's pretty interesting because you might be able to abuse it with an ally. It's clearly meant to be like, oh, I was using a gun, and then my enemy moved adjacent to me, and now I'm going to use a sword. But it's possible that there's a way that you could use it to like have allies move near you, and then use your reaction to swap between like some held items that are not necessarily even weapons if you're using the multiple arms. Because it looks like the trigger is you're wielding a two-handed weapon and a creature moves adjacent to you. If you don't have multiple arms, you have to use it to draw another two-handed weapon. But if you do have multiple arms, you can make another set become active, but it doesn't say it has to have another two-handed weapon. So you might be able to like use it to switch between a two-handed weapon and like a shield and some other defensive stuff. And if you have an ally who goes right next to you, they just like move next to you or something like that right after your turn and get up your defensive gear. So there could be some very interesting, unusual potentials with that one. So ready reload looks like you're wielding a two-handed ranged weapon with a reload of 2 or more, and your last action was an attack that used ammunition, and you can spend 1 action to reload your weapon twice. So obviously that's very powerful if your reload is 2 or more. But reload of 2 or more is also a very harsh reload. Clearly, if you have a Pathfinder, 2e weapon that happens to have a very high reload, then there's currently, I think, not a way to do this. This would be something you would want to multi-class into. So warning shot, you're wielding a weapon with the area or automatic trait, and whenever you roll initiative, you immediately unleash a quick volley to make an area fire or automatic fire with your weapon. Creatures in the area don't take damage, but still might be suppressed. So you basically just start the fight with some suppressing fire. This is, obviously it's not damaging them, but it is among one of the most aggressive things you could do during initiative at 1st level on any class. So it's definitely, I think it's not like a very heavy condition that's going to really mess with the enemies a ton, but that's pretty nice. So at 2nd level, the menacing laughter feat is going to is a single action that is going to AoE intimidate everything that is suppressed within 30 feet of you. That is wildly the best AoE intimidation feat in the game. Yes, you have to combo it with suppressing folks, and so it's not going to be just flat out AoE intimidation. But already, the Barbarian Terrifying Howl was by far the most powerful AoE intimidation that exists in Pathfinder 2e. It's a 10th level feat. It is the same thing, except for that it works only in range, which is easier to do than suppressing your enemies. To be fair, it's the same range. It's also one action. And it has a second temporary immunity clause in case you found a way to get out of temporary immunity to demoralize, which there do exist in the system. Terrifying Howl has a future-proofing. You're also immune to Terrifying Howl, just so you can't just keep spamming this against your opponents. Ryan King asked better than Battle Cry. And Ryan, I said at first level, it's the most aggressive thing you can do. Because I was thinking of Battle Cry, which is not a first level ability. I do think Battle Cry is probably more aggressive because of the kind of things like Terrifying Retreat that you can put onto Battle Cry. And Quag Major mentions Terrifying Howl plus Terrified Retreat being awesome. Yes, Quag Major. I think that Menacing Laughter plus Terrified Retreat is even scarier only because of how much lower level you can throw that on. And you can get it with your Constitution modifier, so you don't even have to invest in Charisma to do that. You can basically, this class is probably one of those powerful stat-wise in terms of being able to dump 2 of the 3 stats that do the least in the Pathfinder 2nd Edition system. Strength, because it just kind of completely replaces most of the strength things you need, unless you're doing athletics or melee weapons. And Charisma, while still doing Intimidation. That means that Intelligence is the only one left that you really have a use for, which it makes your 4 stats every level like very easy to pick, right? Because you can get the 3 that add to key saving throws, and Wisdom of which also adds to Perception, Constitution of which is also adds hit points and is your key ability score, and Dexterity of which makes you hit with your ranged weapons. So you obviously were going to take those anyway, and you can take Intelligence and get lots of skills. So you're in pretty good shape. And if you are the Strength one, then you're still fine, because you don't have to take Intelligence if you don't want to, and that kind of works. And if for some reason you want Diplomacy or Deception, because it's part of your soldier concept, then you kind of still have to get the Constitution to Charisma. That one's not an optional. It's a 3rd level ability, and it's going to be higher anyway, even if it's only a little higher. So I think you're in good shape, kind of no matter what there. So looking into some of the other things you can do, Relentless Endurance. Once per hour when you take damage, you gain what starts as like a pretty high amount of temporary hit points. And then it scales at a rate of like roughly, looks like about 2 temporary hit points per level. So it starts at about like 4 times your level at a level 2, and then it goes up by about 2 per level. It's a randomized amount, so it's not going to be exactly 2 per level. But that's once per hour. That's a good number of temporary hit points. Now, it doesn't say when you gain the temporary hit points compared to the damage. I'm going to assume that they come in like right as the damage is about to apply to you, so that they like reduce the damage by the temporary hit points, because that seems to make sense to me based on although it does say you come back stronger. So like the flavor text may indicate that's like, no, I took the damage, but now I have the temporary hit points. In which case the timing might be interesting on that, like as to what happens in various situations. So that's one that I'm actually not quite sure about. It's obviously a little bit more powerful if it can prevent the damage that triggers it, because if you gain those temporary hit points, it's possible you won't take damage again after that in the next 10 minutes. I mean, you probably will, let's be honest. So the next feat is Steady Up. You're wielding a weapon with the area or automatic trait. And when you are, as one action, you can brace yourself, and your area fire automatic fire takes only a single action instead of 2 until the start of your next turn. If you would be moved 10 feet or less by a forced movement effect, you don't move at all. Taking a later move action negates this effect. So it looks like area fire and automatic fire is a 2-action ability. But that this Steady Up is 1 action that makes it take only 1 action instead of 2. So that seems like that. I'm not sure what the intended difference is between that and a I guess the difference between that and a 3-action ability that just shoots twice on area fire or automatic fire is that you can, if you're quickened, you can mix in the quickened action in between the 2 area fire and automatic fire. Whereas if there was a 3-action that was like you steady and then do these 2 twice, then you would not be able to mix in the quickened action. Even though this is a little more complicated, it also is potentially going to have some unusual effects if you somehow get an additional 1 action that you can pull off otherwise. But I think it's fairly similar to being like, for 3, do it twice instead of for 2 doing it once and then having 1 extra action left over. And you can mix in another action if you're quickened. So at 4th level, there's Overwhelming Assault. So Overwhelming Assault looks like it is lowering your multiple attack penalty against suppressed targets. And it looks like it's basically similar to Agile Grace, the fighter feat, except for that they have to be suppressed. And it's much lower level than the fighter feat. So this is obviously, depending on whether your multiple attack penalty applies to area fire or automatic fire, is either extremely good or not as useful. Also, now that I'm thinking about it, this is actually a very good question. Quag Major made a good point about what I was saying, which is that Steady Up says your next area fire or automatic fire takes 1 action instead of 2, not that all of them take 1 action instead of 2. So I misread this. So in that case, okay, I know what the point of that is then. In that case, it is, Quag Major is absolutely right. I misread that. I see what the usage case is, because it's like, well, you spend 1 action to turn 2 to a 1. I believe the use case is readying in action, because you use Steady Up, then you spend the remaining 2 actions to ready in action, and you can only ready a single action, which you ready the Steadied Up area fire, and then you shoot off the area fire in the middle of whatever you want, and you could potentially use it in other combos. And Ryan King pointed out the same thing, that you can use it in other combos where you have to take a single action ability by splitting it up into 2. Absolutely. All right. So yeah, looking to Overwhelming Assault, it feels like if doing area fire or automatic fire does not use your multiple attack penalty, then the melee one that kind of suppresses by hitting you multiple times with the big weapon is the only one that really gets use out of it. But it's interesting because of the fact that clearly these area fire is using a saving throw, and normally saving throw is not affected by multiple attack penalty, right? But if it's not affected by multiple attack penalty, then this is a pretty big power boost for the area weapons, in terms of, like, if you can mix in an attack that isn't area for 1 action that has no map, because the area one has no map, and then 2 actions use an area ability, right? Like, for any martial character, that's going to be, assuming that the 2 action area ability is not, like, really weak and disappointing, that's going to be really strong, because you're trading, like, what would have been like a minus, a -5 map and -10 map attack for the area ability. So I actually wonder how they're going to handle the fact that that area effects normally don't apply multiple attack penalty, and how Overwhelming Assault plays into that option. So that is very cool. So Punishing Salvo is your last action this turn with a primary target strike. It's 1 action, and you can make a second strike against your primary target, ignoring the effect of Unwieldy that prevents additional attacks. This doesn't make a new area attack, instead treated as just a single strike against the target made using the primary target rule. So I suppose that the answer is, if the area does not apply map, then primary target could be a reason that that you wanted to apply map. Also, Quag Major points out that there's a very unusual statement that the second attack of your turn is made at -9. Or sorry, the third attack is made at -9 or -8 with an agile weapon. That's a little weird. If it was reading exactly the same as Agile Grace, it would say it was made at -8 or -6 with an agile weapon. So, yeah, that is actually kind of unusual. Or at the very least, it would, if they meant that they weren't going to actually help you as much as Agile Grace, it should say -9 or -7 with an Agile weapon. If it's just like, oh, it only helps you by 1, even on the later attacks, instead of helping reducing the entire bonus, or sorry, the entire penalty by 1, and then therefore when you apply it twice, reducing it by 2. So I feel like it should either be 8-6 or 9-7 rather than 9-8. But it may be that it's intended as an anti-synergy with Agile weapons. Not clear. All I can tell you is this field test is way cleaner than what we had for the alpha test with 5 levels of like the fighter class, for example, in PF2. So if there are a few small glitches in it, well, I blame the glitch gremlins, probably. So let's see. Punishing Salvo, we mentioned, is the one where you can basically just attack again against the primary target. And primary target is a pretty decent reason to use Overwhelming Assault, even if the area effects just ignore map. Widen Area is a 1 action that makes it so that you get a bigger area on your weapon. That seems cool. It's kind of like a meta magic for your weapon. So that is the soldier class in the first 5 levels. Dustin says that they do have the attack trait, Area Fire and Automatic Fire, which means that the attack trait is going to have to add back in something that it once had in very early Pathfinder 2 playtest, where it was able to reduce the DC on things that are based on DCs by 5 or 4 for Agile or whatever. It used to have that, like when it first started out. But there were some issues with that in terms of timing, and eventually we just decided to just let you apply no map on anything that like was doing saving throws. But it completely makes sense to me, and in fact, I didn't even question it until I started reading it there, that since it's with your weapon that you're attacking with, that is an exception to that rule. And Scott S points out meta magic would be called spell shape now. Absolutely correct. So it's kind of like a spell shape, but for weapons. So that's a great clarification that we have, that may be like a first look clarification from the Starfinder team that they do have the attack trait. I was surmising that they probably did, both by the existence of the Overwhelming Assault and just like otherwise that's just a huge power boost for anyone who can use those weapons to be able to do that. So looking at the new equipment rules, we see some very interesting things here. First of all, A for acid damage, C for cold, E for electricity, F for fire, M for mental, PO for poison, and SO for sonic. So that is super cool. There's also a comment about switching around guns to try out new playstyles is cool, but also people like to upgrade their weapons too. So I think it's going to be awesome to be able to have both of those. So multi-armed characters' ability to have multiple weapons out and then they switch between pairs of active hands with the switch active hands interact action is very interesting. It technically says you can only attack with weapons wielded in your active hands. It does not say that the other ones are not held and can't use their abilities, but I'm going to assume that the ones that are not in active hands do not work at all. Like you can't raise shields, you can't shield block with them, you do not get your thaumaturge implements with them, because obviously if you did get your thaumaturge implements with them, this would have not like immediately break thaumaturge. So I'm assuming, just based on the flavor text at the beginning, that since only one of, it says, only one are your active hands, and you have to change them around, that it's meant that the other ones are like, you pretend that they're like kind of stowed or they're not being in use. And then even though it says you can only attack with weapons in your active hands, I bet that's in here because this is the equipment section about weapons. So it was focused on that. So capacity is talking about batteries and magazines for weapons, and it's just kind of what we would. Oh no! I think I lost you for like a second. Am I back? Am I back? Am I back? Let's see if I'm back. I may be back. My computer just said Obio's studio has lost the connection. so for a very brief period of time. Great, I'm back. Where was I? People said I'm not back. I'm not back to Mostly Harmless, but everyone else said I was back, so I'm going to trust everyone else. Sorry, Mostly Harmless. So it looks like usage is not only similar to the Pathfinder 2 usage, but also can indicate when you're firing more than one piece of ammo from the weapon at once, because it says how much is consumed. And then there's upgrades, such as accessories and hybrid weapon fusions that indicate how many upgrades the weapon can utilize. That's probably, the replacement for runes, since we're going to see later that archaic weapons use runes. Then there are analog weapons that works just like in Starfinder 1, it looks like, where it's just not technological. Weapon runes found in Pathfinder still don't function on the weapon unless it's archaic, and is not technically correct when referring to technology. Use of the term has become common throughout the Pact worlds. That is true. That is not technically correct. And so that's a nice little note to have in there. Archaic weapons, just like in Starfinder 1, it means that, like, hey, I'm using a flintlock musket. We talked about this at the beginning of the stream, but, like, shouldn't it be worse to use a flintlock musket than these new Starfinder weapons? And the rule for that is archaic, which makes you gain resistance 10 against the attacks if you are not using an archaic armor. So this is a rule that if you just wanted to put Starfinder into Pathfinder and just ignore all the lore implications of the fact that the new weapon should be more effective, since it's tens of thousands of years into the future, then you would be able to just, like, probably just kind of just click off the archaic trait or something like that, and that would allow you to transparently use the systems without the Starfinder stuff having an advantage. So I feel like it's so easy to do that if you want for gameplay reasons, but it makes sense from a lore perspective why this exists. So area weapons, the area trait tells you that the weapon is area, and here we have the area fire and automatic fire, which do have the attack trait. So the fact that they have the attack trait, I suppose, doesn't prove that they actually apply the multiple attack penalty. So I guess when I said that they would need to come up with a way to apply the multiple attack penalty, maybe they don't. Like, it, which means that just, like, you are absolutely, if it doesn't apply the multiple attack penalty to the DC, you absolutely should never, ever do, like, the first, or no, I guess it doesn't matter what the order. Well, you should always attack first with the one that is a single attack and then do the area fire, because if you do the area fire first and attack trait is on there but it doesn't apply the multiple attack penalty, then you've just given yourself multiple attack penalty on the other attack for no particular reason. So we're going to have to see that moving onward, whether or not that multiple attack penalty applies. I kind of assumed it did, but what Dustin said in the chat was only that it had the attack trait, which we can just literally see here in the document that it does. So it was not actually a inside information. It was just something that was flat out in the document. And the area fire is a 2 action that is going to do the area damage and do critical specialization effects on a critical failure on the save. Automatic is going to let you use automatic fire, which is going to hit creatures in a cone instead of whatever the other area would be, and deal area damage in the same way. Concussive trait is exactly the same as in Pathfinder 2, with bludgeoning and piercing, and it does whichever of the two is better. The tech trait, as sort of the opposite of the analog trait, it looks like, is saying that it has electronics and computers, and they might have integrated power sources and not have a capacity. Weapon runes still do not work on them. The tracking trait adds an item bonus to attack rolls. It looks like it is kind of replacing the fundamental plus rune with the tracking trait. And I think that's pretty cool. It just is, like, built into the higher level weapons. So you don't have to worry about getting some kind of runes. Your weapon is just going to have it for you. The unwieldy trait looks like weapons with this trait are large and awkward, and they need to cool down, and you can only use that weapon once per round and can't use it as part of a reaction, such as Punitive Strike. Which could mean that you could have two unwieldy weapons, if you have multiple arms, then you like attack with one of them and then switch and attack with the other one. Or if they're one-handed, you could attack even more easily with multiple unwieldy weapons, which is different than Starfinder, where it's just like the unwieldy weapon, that was the only attack you were going to make. So I would expect, and we'll probably see it here, yes, we do see it in these unwieldy weapons very clearly, that, you know, in Starfinder 1, unwieldy weapons did absolutely massive amounts of damage compared to their competitor weapons because, I mean, it wasn't like completely paradigm shifting, but it was enough to make up for the fact that you couldn't full attack with them. It was a significant disadvantage. And at this point, there is a lot less of a disadvantage potentially, but it's still there. There's still a disadvantage, but you can get around it. But in exchange, the unwieldy weapons are not doing like some absurdly higher amount than the non-unwieldy weapons, which if you're following along in the file, you'll be able to see down in the list of weapons. So it's got cool critical specialization effects for laser and projectile. Laser is going to dazzle until the start of your next turn with a fortitude save. That's an interesting one. I like dazzle. Dazzle almost strikes me as a condition that you might be able to get away with putting on to someone without a save, although that would certainly be very awesome because it gives them a 20% mischance. And projectile is the typical save or slowed one. Very, very standard critical specialization effect, very good critical specialization effect. Kind of what you would expect based on some of the gun ones in Pathfinder 2. And then it has a bunch of simple weapons. There's a lot of lore descriptions of them, and it talks about credits and currency. We could see, looking into these sample weapons, that it follows the Pathfinder 2 level design for fundamental runes. So you've got a laser pistol. It's a D6, 40-foot range. And the second level laser pistol has tracking +1, just like a +1 weapon rune. And the fourth level laser pistol has 2 damage dice, just like a striking rune, right? And then similarly, the scattergun, which is a cone area unwieldy weapon, is a D6. And then the second level one has a +1 tracking. And the fourth level one has a second damage die. And the prices are also very similar. The credit prices are look like they're numbers that you might be able to see in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, right? It's the fourth level one is 1,030, whereas the laser pistol is 30. And if you look at Pathfinder 2nd Edition fundamental runes, you can see that this seems to be the case that, at least on these items, which, you know, are the only ones that we have right now, a credit seems to be worth 1 silver piece, roughly, right? Because it would be 100 to get a striking +1 striking weapon in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It's 1,000 to get some of these 4th level weapons. So the roto laser is automatic. It is D8. It is not unwieldy, but it is two-handed. And then it goes up to, again, tracking +1 at 2nd level and second die at 4th level. And the stellar cannon is an unwieldy area burst, 10 feet, D10, then tracking +1 at 2nd level, then at 4th level, it gets its second die. So we can see here how there's a transparency between the fundamental runes in Pathfinder 2 and the Starfinder weapons. It directly says 10 credits equals 1 gold piece. That's what I get for like going very quickly through the credits section. Absolutely. So it looked exactly like that when I just looked at the prices when I got excited and looked at all of the weapons. So there you go. So you can see how this means that you could deconstruct the Starfinder weapons to create a Pathfinder equivalent of them if you wanted to, right? Like, if you wanted to, you could make something that's called, like, a laser pistol that can take runes. It's like a Mystic Tech laser pistol. Or even you call it, like, a, maybe you make a type of weapon. Wand is already an item in Pathfinder, but, so we have to come up with, like, a different name for it than wand. Well, let's say battle wand. A new type of weapon. It's called battle wand. I've got the fire battle wand. What does it do? Well, its base damage is a d6 with range of 40, and it can hold up to 5 mystic charges, and then if you put at least a +1 rune on it, it goes up to 10, because the laser pistol that I'm basing this off of goes up to 10 charges at 2nd level. And you can put striking runes on it because it's a battle wand, and you could put other things on it. So you could probably, it's very easy to look into this and see what the equivalencies are. And at least with these first 4 levels of them, you could probably mix and match. The reason these don't apply runes, it seems like partially is because they do apply a new Starfinder meta currency that can go onto the weapons that are discussed above. That'll be more tied into the Starfinder weapons. In some cases, the runes might not make sense on an area weapon because it's like, okay, this says it does something on a successful hit, but what does that even mean for my area weapon? Or if you say, well, it applies on a failed save, then suddenly maybe some of the things that happen on a hit are things that you might not have wanted at that price to put onto like everything in a wide area, right? So there are things to consider if you do this hack that I just mentioned, but it looks like you can easily see that from the weapons. You can see how much the Starfinder team and everyone at Paizo have worked to make these transparent and compatible, just like they said they would, just by looking at these, because it's as compatible as possible there. So going on into the creatures, we see that there's a glitching condition. Now, the glitching condition is some kind of tech, item, or creature has a DC 10 flat check when it's glitching. On a critical success, you reduce the glitching value by 1. On a success, you act normally. On a failure, you take an item penalty on all checks and DCs equal to your glitching value, or the glitching value on the item you're attempting to use. And the critical failure is you're stunned 1 for the round, or the object you try to use doesn't function, and you lose the actions you took to attempt to use it. So that one is definitely very interesting condition. And as I said earlier in the stream, you might potentially be able to use that condition in order to create like a mystic glitch that you put onto magical creatures that that does something in the same way. That's based on wellspring magic overcharging them. And so in that case, you would be able to use this same idea. Now, there's a really interesting thing about this that I find unusual, which is that the failure and critical failure are not actually like a strict progression. By which I mean, it's possible if your glitching value is very high that you would much rather be stunned 1 than you would be to take a penalty on all your checks and DCs equal to your glitching value. If, especially if you were like already stunned or something like that at that point in time. So my guess is maybe in the final version that the critical failure will also make you take the item penalty on the checks and DCs and stun you, because it's kind of more typical to do both. But I just really love the glitching condition overall, just as a thematic. I think that there's a reason Pathfinder 2 doesn't have more conditions, and it's that people already say it has a lot of conditions, and it does. But I think that very judiciously putting in new conditions is a cool thing to do. And putting it in when it's thematic, even better. That's something that I'm working with in some of the classes that I'm writing right now for Roll for Combat. Is I have these Ice Aldemon, and I added a frozen condition, which like slowly freezes you up and gives you a cumulative status penalty to speed, and then you can interact to like break the ice and get rid of it. And so it basically puts a character into a fork where they are either going at slow movement speed or they spend an action. So they're not quite stunned, but either way, it can mess around with them. And delivering the really cool flavor through just a perfectly written condition that really feels like that flavor, like this glitching condition, I think is really cool. And it shows the kind of creativity that we're going to see moving forward. So this computer glitch gremlin, we look at it, and other than this new glitching condition, which you could use anywhere, it just looks completely like a stat block that you would see for a Pathfinder 2nd edition creature. It's got tiny Fey Gremlin tech traits, because it's made with tech. It's got its perception line. It's got a sense tech ability, which is a... it says it can sense items and creatures with the tech trait within 100 feet. Now, it doesn't say that it's imprecise, but we haven't seen in the remaster whether remaster changes like the default of precise and imprecise. Otherwise, that means it's actually a precise sense, which is pretty solid for a -1, but it does have to be something with a tech trait, which, you probably have on you in Starfinder, so you watch out for these guys. They communicate telepathically with digital devices. They've got a glitch aura, which kind of makes them the Pugwampies of Starfinder, I'm guessing, because instead of giving you like a misfortune, they're just going to mess up all your stuff and cause glitching 1 or glitching 2 on a critical failure. And they've got like very, very low cold and electricity resistance, like low enough that very few creatures tend to have a resistance that low because it's 1. So at that point, it's like you have to remember it just to have it be 1. But honestly, at that level, 1 is a significant amount. And it's got significant weakness at that level, which is 2 to cold, iron, and fire. So you need to use the right kind of weapons against a computer glitch gremlin. And then it's got its speeds, just climbing or its land speed. Now, it actually has a bite strike instead of like a jaws strike or a or some other thing like that. That's an interesting one. So if this picture is a computer glitch gremlin, it looks like it's like a goblin that's been corrupted by like glitches and has like an emoji face on it. If you're seeing the document, you can take a look on it too. So it's possible that what happens is that's like the bite is like more metaphorical than and that's why it's changed into something that's more like a verb, because maybe it's like not with physical teeth but is doing, well, it does say it's piercing, so I'm not sure. And it's got an unstable spark, which is a very small range and does a little bit of electricity damage to the target. Plus it has figment, recharge weapon, delete, thunderstrike, and electric arc, which have proved the existence of electric arc in the remaster in a very interesting way, which is that it is on computer glitch gremlin. I mean, it's not 100% proof. And Iron Mortar says bite attack with a Y, B-Y-T-E. That's kind of what I was thinking, but then I saw it was B-I-T-E. But like it may be that it's not using a physical part of itself, and so it needed to use a verb, whereas normally in Pathfinder 2 you use a noun for a strength. That's something that we're going to have to see. And it looks, on Figment we've seen before in the remastered document, whereas recharge weapon, delete are new spells that they are playtesting and designing for Starfinder. That does mean that if we are using this right now, if we wanted to do a playtest where everybody plays soldiers, or actually Pathfinder 2 characters working together and fight the computer glitch gremlin, that you wouldn't be able to use its delete recharge weapon ability. But honestly, you probably don't have to, right? You could just use its Thunderstrike and its other abilities, and it should be fine. And we have Figment, and you can use old Electric Arc for now. So then there's the Laser Wolf, Tashtari and Tashtari Alpha. So these Laser Wolves, they've got knockdown, just like, which, as you may know from the remastered document, has been nerfed so that you now have to roll an athletics check on it. For grab, it's like kind of a buff and a nerf, but for knockdown, it's like basically a nerf because you can get a critical success now, but the 1d6 damage is not a big deal. And they've got a muzzle beam because they're a laser wolf that does fire and persistent fire, plus a bristle flash for one action that they need to bask in sunlight for 10 minutes to do it again, but it looks like it's going to dazzle you at least for a round unless you critically succeed, and possibly blind you for a round, and likely dazzle you for a minute unless you make it. So that's pretty cool. They're resistant to fire, and they also can climb. Because, climbing and flying and those things, like we said, more common in Starfinder. And they all have ranged attacks too. Also more common in Starfinder. And the Alpha is just a more powerful version that also has Solar Cry. 2 action, shoots a muzzle beam into the sky that splits into rays of light that then shower down, dealing fire damage to everything that's not a Tashtari in the emanation, that also dazzles on a critical failure. And then other Tashtaris in the area recharge their bristle flash. It says it's a daily use, but I'm going to assume that it means like the 10-minute bask in sunlight thing, because I think that makes sense. And Then the Testari Alpha needs to go into sunlight for an hour to get back Solar Cry, which also is like a big ability, so it makes sense since it can recharge all the 10-minute abilities that it is harder to recharge. So it fits the story. It's got cool abilities. It's using all of the action economy of Pathfinder 2e. I mean, this looks awesome. So, oh, and Steven's in the chat now. Hello, Steven. We're talking about Starfinder without you. Because Steven is at the convention. Do you have any updates for us, Steven, from the convention floor? Is there anything that you're planning on doing for the Starfinder launch? I know that you got really excited about it. Darn it, OBS. Darn it, OBS. What is going on, OBS? OBS just disconnected and then reconnected. So I think you guys could probably hear me again since it said that it reconnected again. So I was answering Great Role-Playing Debbie's question of why SF if it's so similar as to be compatible with PF, why not simply do Spacey source books? Also, Dustin says there's a glitch gremlin in my OBS. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with OBS. It just is saying that it loses the connection every once in a while. So I greeted Steven, and I said to Steven, hi on the floor, and do you have anything that you want to say about what you want to do for Starfinder? Oh, and hi to Rules Lawyer. Hey there, Rules Lawyer. Did Steven pull the plug? Asked Jesse Reyes. No, I think not. All right, the darn it OBS came through, so it keeps continuity somehow. That's very interesting. So, all right, the question was, why not just do Spacey source books? So the answer to that is something that we don't completely know, because only Paizo knows the answer to that. But I think there's some very, very compelling reasons why not. Seriously, OBS. Okay, so OBS just glitched out again, and I'm not sure what's going on with it. I'm not sure what's going on with it. This is not ever happened to be using OBS on Twitch. I've never used it on YouTube, and I've never used it on YouTube, but I don't know why it's causing me any trouble, because it hasn't caused me any trouble before. So yeah, it totally interrupted me again on OBS because it doesn't want me to reveal the truth. It doesn't want me to answer Great Role-Playing Debbie's question. So I'm going to answer what I think the answer to the question is for Great Role-Playing Debbie. And OBS, you best behave. I'm watching you, OBS. Okay, so basically the compelling reasons why not to just make Spacey new source books is from earlier in the stream I mentioned this, but while it's clearly fully compatible with the rule set for Pathfinder 2, Starfinder still has some of its own setting assumptions that are different than Pathfinder 2 setting assumptions. One of them is flying and ranged attacks being very ubiquitous at lower levels. That's something that you would want to consider to be like it's different enough, and we don't know what they're going to do about environmental suits, but that wasn't in Starfinder 1 a very different assumption where it's just like, yeah, you can ignore like all this environment stuff for when you're dealing with settings so that you can go to the packed worlds that would be very poisonous in the environment from first level. We don't know for sure from this preview, but we have very high indications that like ranged weapons are being very important again, just like in Starfinder 1. So I think that because of some of the assumption difference, it makes sense. Also, when you look at the potential of Starfinder, it has the potential to be its own line. To have, Starfinder Adventures and Starfinder Society. I mean, it already is doing that, and it has the potential to continue doing that. So you kind of would want a different branding and a different edition on that. You don't want to put just the Pathfinder logo on a Starfinder Adventure path. That's harder to figure out what you're doing. It's harder to keep them separate and understand for new consumers. They pick it up, and it's just got all the space thing. It just said Pathfinder, and they're like, what's going on? Secondly, there's also thirdly, I said two things before this. There's an entire Starfinder team that works on Starfinder. So and they're going to presumably be working on these really awesome potential Starfinder 2 projects, right? So having a branded second system brand of Starfinder, I think, is a benefit. It's a benefit that you would not want to lose by just being like, oh, this is the Pathfinder book with the Pathfinder logo that just says Starfinder on it. So that's my answer to you, role-playing Debbie. And Rules Lawyer says it leaves it to GMs and tables who want to mix their chocolate with their peanut butter. And yes, that way also you can talk about what is common in Starfinder. And you can say in the Starfinder book, hey, if you use this in Pathfinder, it's all rare. But you can then put your own uncommon and rare traits for things that are uncommon and rare in Starfinder and not have to worry about it. And so Krasimia says also it could potentially allow more crossovers, and that's definitely true as well. And Darth Studicus is wondering if there are changes to ship combat, and we don't know yet. There's no details about that. I speculated earlier when someone asked that question that it would be a great way to use some of the tech that's in like the 4 degrees of success and victory point subsystems. Obviously, ships have hit points, so it's not like just victory points. And I also speculated that if that happens and it's out there, you could reskin it to use it for like naval combat in Pathfinder 1. Not 1, Pathfinder 2. Pathfinder 2. I was like going back to Pathfinder 2, but I said 1 because it's an earlier edition. So you would be able to reskin it for naval combats potentially. I mean, there may be some computer things you change it to magic spells, but I think that it's going to be an awesome potential. Great Roleplaying Debbie said, did not think about that. Setting assumptions codified into rules makes sense. No one wants my jetpack mechanic to have to spend an action. I'm convinced. Yeah, exactly. There's probably going to be like a few small setting assumptions that you could probably put on like... You could probably just put those into a sidebar if you wanted to. I mentioned this. For Roll for Combat, we could have our dragon ancestry just flatly usable in Starfinder. You could use it without any notes, or you could use it with a tiny sidebar maybe that is like, hey, flying and ranged attacks are really common in Starfinder, so you can, if you want, lower these flying feats to a lower ancestry feat level if you're using it in Starfinder. Other than that, use exactly what's in this book in all ways. So, I mean, if you didn't have that, just like using a jetpack for the dragon, as I said earlier in the episode, would be a more efficient way to get the flying, and that's not a problem. It just means that you would use the Starfinder versions and not the ones that were in the book. But if you had that small sidebar that would not take very long, it would allow you to even smooth over like that one setting assumption difference, which still proves just that it's completely compatible there. And so let's see. Other people are saying they would love genericized, like mass vehicle combat rules, and great role playing Gabby's GM is talking about their GM and the starship combat system. So yeah, absolutely. So Rohit Gupta says, I don't know if this has been discussed yet. The new class that is supposed to be rare could be related to Starfinder. You could be right, Rohit, but I don't think so. That's just my thought is that it wouldn't be, because it's in a playtest in September and it was for a Pathfinder product, and Starfinder looks like it's a different stage of the process, such that I don't think it would be. You know what? I could be wrong about that, but I doubt it. So Glade Riven says they've been sneaking in Starfinder bits here and there into Pathfinder 2 already. I mean, yeah, a little bit, but this is something that I think is going to make a big difference. And let's see. So we've gone through an introduction where I talked about what this is, why this is huge, why this could mean you could have other finders. You could have a hero finder or a modern finder, other things like that, that all have transparency between the Starfinder and Pathfinder 2 systems. And I mentioned that it's more like GURPS, where you can plug and play, than it is like just like Powered by the Apocalypse or Forged in the Dark, where you use the core chassis of like the mechanical pieces, but the systems are different. It's not really like that. Because if it was like that, it would just use the degrees of success, and it would just use the 3-action system, and then do its whole own different economy of scale. And we've seen, looking at this field test, that they are definitely doing exactly what they've said. Like Paizo, Paizo are honest with us when they say they're going to do things, and they said they're going to make it fully compatible. It looks fully compatible to me. So that is what I was mentioning at the beginning, and what this means for Paizo and for Roll for Combat and for other companies is that we can put out products that are used by both. And it's not going to be too hard for us to put in some extra descriptions in case you want to use dragons or our new ancestries in Starfinder. Like, I would be excited by that. Who here in chat would be excited of seeing Starfinder versions of some of the Roll for Combat catalog that are just basically the same version, but maybe we give you a tiny note to be like, hey, these are like a couple of changes that you can make if you want, and then otherwise it would work. Like, I think that would be great. Like, that's something we could do. It would literally be a tiny sidebar that would not take up a lot of space. So people who didn't want to use it for Starfinder, they would be fine. And that's where it would be at. So Gustavo Noguera, it looks like we're not seeing KAC or EAC, which again, for people who are watching this who don't know what those are, kinetic and energy armor class that was split up in Starfinder before, we're not seeing that in the document. So it looks like it probably does not have those, but I speculated that you could do something like that by having a creature that was like off guard against kinetic attacks or energy attacks. There's so many ways to use the Pathfinder 2 rule set to sort of mimic some of the things that you remember from Starfinder pretty easily. So let's see what people are saying in chat. People are saying yes, space slushies. Space slimes. Yeah, space slimes. Absolutely. So, Richard Frenzen is wondering if the newly announced book with like the god situation is going to put in-universe reason for the remastered changes. I don't know. It doesn't seem like the timing is such that it's going to come out exactly with the remaster, but it could be. Like, it just depends on what they want to do. So, space dragons are the coolest, says Rohit. Yeah, I think they're awesome. And some of our dragons that we have in Battle Zoo Ancestries Dragons are the space ones from Pathfinder 1, right? Like the Void Dragon and the Rift Dragon and all those other Vortex Dragon. Actually, the Rift was a different one. Void, Vortex, Sun, Moon, and Time are like the five dragons that were like mostly from space, the outer dragons, and those are cool. I really like the idea of moon dragons who are just interested in like watching mortals, and so I put some lore into Battles of Ancestors Dragons about them like kind of seeing mortal life as like, you know, a soap opera or a telenovela, and so the ones that become adventures and PCs are just like yelling at the screen, being like, mortals, oh, you mortals, you're doing the wrong thing. No, you should. These two people should get together. Oh no, don't walk into that scary house. It's obviously trapped. They're the kind of viewer who are just like, I would do this differently, and so they like go into the setting by becoming PCs so that they can interrupt and like ship their favorite ships and get people to like do the obvious smart thing that they would do if they were going around. So I think that some of the outer space dragons are really cool, and we already had some of those in Battles of Ancestries Dragons moving forward. So J-Rock is wondering what the target release date is. So what they said on the stream is that they are doing these field tests now, and that they're expecting to release Starfinder playtest rulebook in summer 2024 is what they say in the document. So when in summer? Well, I don't know. Like, Gen Con seems like it's in summer 2024, but they didn't say that. They said summer 2024, so that gives them a little flexibility, but, like, Gen Con could be a good time for it, potentially. And at that point, they are going to go for in-depth feedback for the final game. So, like, when Pathfinder got a playtest book at Gen Con, it then there was 1 year between then and when Pathfinder 2 got out, the final Pathfinder 2 book. And that Pathfinder 2 final book, I will say, it was agonizingly difficult to get it out in 1 year from when the playtest started, but it was possible, and it was done before. So doesn't say in the playtest document when they are when they're planning to get the final book out, but with Pathfinder 2, it was the year after, and I could certainly see that as a possibility as well. Someone in chat says, if I recall, the playtest book is going to be August. That wouldn't surprise me. That would be a Gen Con release. So J-Rock says, that's why new Starfinder content is seriously slowed. It certainly seems that way. Glade Raven says, Indigo Isles could easily be popped onto Castrovel, Triaxis, or even his own planet in the Vast. I think so too, Glade Raven. And I think so too, Glade Raven. And I think that means that, the World of Battlezoo Indigo Isles Kickstarter that we have that is currently active, it definitely has that Starfinder vibe to it with like all of these ancestries that are around and going on. I can just put a link to it here if people haven't seen it before. I could easily see like pirate parrots and some of these other things being in Starfinder. They honestly would like give a high five to the Morlama walruses and all the other things that are around there. Jonathan S. said, didn't they say 2025 in the stream? I do not remember for sure, Jonathan S. So I want to be very careful about about saying something unless someone is sure that they did. But Jonathan S. thinks they said that, and it certainly would match the pace of Pathfinder's playtest to the for the second edition to Pathfinder second edition release. So that's what we could probably expect just based on precedent that they would match. So if anyone is certain that they said that, then we can go ahead and confirm that. But otherwise, it's a very good guess anyway. Unlimited also heard that. So, okay, I think we could confirm that. I also thought I heard it in the stream, but I didn't want to be wrong if they hadn't said that and didn't want to commit it. So, we have 3 people. I call that conclusive. So, Heather Sarek says there are hints of previous alien life on the Indigo Isles. Heather, you're right. I mean, there were literally... I mean, the main deities in the Indigo Isles are aliens, somewhat. They came from another dimension, not another planet, but they just came from another dimension, and there are these giant kaiju ravaging around the area, and they kind of create these first 2 interdimensional deities created a giant dragon deity to fight the kaiju and beat the kaiju and protect people from the kaiju, and then a bunch of other deities to deal with the dragon deity that they created because they kept making problems for themselves. It is a very interesting situation, but it would work well in Starfinder. I think that would be really cool. And if people are really excited about Starfinder, I urge you to comment about it. If you're excited about Starfinder and the Indigo Isles, comment about it on that Kickstarter. And I think it could be possible to put in some small note. Obviously the game is not going to be out yet, so we can't say anything definitively about Starfinder with a product that is launching, is going to come to you literally in a month. It's not going to have everything it needs for Starfinder 2, and it would be foolish to lock ourselves into using exact wording that is from this field test document, because that's probably going to change in the final game. But we could at least talk about some lore considerations if you wanted to put it into Starfinder or something like that, if a lot of people are interested in seeing that. So, Elftro also heard that the full release would be expected for 2025. So we all heard that. That's good. I didn't want to put in speculation if it wasn't confirmed. So that is awesome. And it's a while to wait, but at the same time, it's not that long considering just how much content this is going to have. Gustavo points out another way to do something with KAC and EAC could be to have differing hardness. Yes, another thing I mentioned earlier in the stream when this came up is you could have a critical, an armor specialization effect for certain armors that were good against energy types that actually gave resistance to energy types instead of giving resistance to physical types, which all of the Pathfinder 2 armors give resistance to critical hits or physical types. So you could easily do that. And I think that would be a different way to handle that without bringing back KAC and EAC, which they probably are not going to do. Because that would make it less compatible. And as we've seen, it is very, very compatible. So, I've been here talking about both the general overall information, and I did a deep dive of pretty much the entire preview document, looking at like every tiny implication of every word choice that is on there, and decision, and what cool things that means that we can expect to be able to use including if you try to bring some of them into your Pathfinder game. And I think that it is really cool. I'm going to answer any other questions that people have here, but I've said a lot of what I wanted to say when I just made this giant emergency stream, because, oh my gosh, Starfinder 2 announcement was so ridiculous. And so let's see if there are any other questions here in chat. So I've seen multiple people talking about wondering if stamina rules are going to be in there as the default. I don't know. It doesn't say. None of the soldier feats interact with stamina. So we don't know if the stamina rules will be default or not. I mean, they were certainly from Starfinder originally, and that's why they made it as an optional rule in Pathfinder 2, is kind of because that was something people liked in Starfinder. But that doesn't mean Starfinder has to use that rule by default. I would say one possible pro to not using it by default is it makes it even more compatible with PF2, because if you have a lot of assumptions that are built around definitely having stamina in the game, then that means that it would be harder to use those again, it doesn't have stamina of PF2. So I would say having stamina be optional, but maybe more prominent in Starfinder 2 could be a way to do that. But right, if you think about it, if there's X number of feats and abilities that your character can gain that are based on stamina, then that would mean that let's say you had a class that had a bunch of stamina feats as class feats, and you tried to play it in a Pathfinder 2 game that did not have stamina, then you wouldn't be able to use those feats, which doesn't make it unusable at all. It just makes it have somewhat fewer options. Dreedon wonders if archaic weapons get resist 10 by Starfinder armor, would sci-fi weapons do 10 extra to archaic armor? It does not say that they do in the document, so I'm guessing that they don't. And Nick Lucas is wondering how they'll do ancestries. I think they'll do them exactly the same way. We see that the ancestry feats come at the same levels, so I think it's very likely that they'll do them in the same way. It looks like Eric S. Riley's main jaw drop was people saying Zon Shellen. As a major Shellen fan, well, you know, I in my games, I'm going to try not to think about the fact that she might have gotten corrupted. That makes me a little bit sad, but I think that a lot of people are going to be very, very excited about that, because I know there are a lot of people who like grimmer, darker futures when dealing with more future content. Shellen is definitely in the Pathfinder setting, which when it started out was pretty had a lot of grim things that are in it. Oh, Thirsty confirmed you can still worship them separately. Okay, so they are not combined into one thing like people have been speculating, where like Shellen gets corrupted by the glaive and now is no longer a deity because she merged into him, but maybe they're a pantheon then. That's actually very cool. Then I'm not reticent. I'm wholeheartedly into the pantheon of Shellen and Zon Katan. As a Shellen fan, if Zon Shellen is a Janiform or Pantheon that you can worship, but that they are still exist as separate entities. Just because in current Pathfinder, there's a lot of like happier, more cheerful things that have been added through the years. But when I first started playing Pathfinder, it seemed like everything everywhere in the world was going wrong. It's like, oh yeah, there's a world wound and there's these other things, that everything is terrible. All of these deities are like unknowable and are going to destroy everything. But Shellen was someone who actually took a corrupted glaive that had corrupted her brother, and she started uncorrupting it, And she was like I felt like one of the kind of beacons of light of hope in the setting. So I think it's cool that that they're not completely subsumed, which Dustin pointed out. Because I heard Zanshan in the speech, but I have to admit I was like furiously setting this stream up also during it, so I didn't hear literally every word that was said. But having them together as like a Pantheon or Janiform or something is also really awesome. So that's super cool. And pain glaives, yes, were mentioned as the favorite weapon of it. And people are saying that in chat as well. Dustin says chainsaw glaive is on my bucket list design since high school. That's awesome. So, Zolgathor says she followed her brother into the great beyond with a spaceship. Well, that was the story of why she wasn't listed as one of the core deities in Starfinder. She was like looking for him or went after him or something like that. So I think that that's probably right. And so I love the idea of merged religions, Janiform deities, different aspects that people would worship, and pantheons being part of a religion, because it's so true to life. And just the way that things worked on Earth, where like you come across other religions and they start blending together, and or even getting just mixed in. Like in some ways, Greek mythology is like comic book universes where they do crossovers or just like add something into their canon. Like for example, Aphrodite. In some of the early Greek mythology, she was not in there. She was not. I mean, she's such a major character. We could not even think of Greek mythology without her. But in some of the early stuff, she wasn't around because she was a deity from Cyprus. And, you know, they ran into people who worship, and that's why, like, Kypria or something like that is one of her, titles. Because she was just this major Aphrodite deity, Cyprus deity, and they were like, oh yeah, she's important. She could be in here. We're adding her. And they added her in different ways into their myths. So Homer did not use the traditional one that you probably remember is like the sea foam when Uranus was defeated by Kronos, and then out of the sea foam came Aphrodite on a shell. That's like by far the most famous one. But Homer did something else and said Dione, one of the Titans, and Zeus just had one of the more traditional Zeus and a Titan have a fling and have Aphrodite, and they say, yeah, her mother's name is Dione. She's just around. So this was like an expanded universe where they were just adding in these deities in real world mythology. And so doing something where there's multiple different ways and multiple ways to think about deities is just super cool. It makes it feel more realistic in terms of the way that religions form. And obviously in this world, there are real deities. In Starfinder, which in our mortal world, you know what? There's no conclusive decision on that, but certainly there's not like tons of evidence of deities coming down and sending heralds on Earth in the modern era. And so there are going to be some differences when it comes to coming up with weird ways that deities do things. It's going to be harder for you to just like be totally different about a deity and not have the deity just themselves be, hey, you know what? Maybe we didn't do that. I still find it interesting when we were working on some of the deities for Indigo Isles, for example, these interdimensional deities came in, and two of them are deities of life and death that were eventually born to regulate life and death. And it's very clear to people who really understand the history of the world that they're regulating life and death. They did not create life and death. But some of their like very, very vociferous worshippers are like, no, they created life and death. There was no life or death before they were born. And people are like, well, how were they born? No, there was no life or death before that. And the deities themselves like say they admit that there was, but it still has a theological condition. And so I don't know. I really get interested in stuff like this, and I think that it seems like Zon Shellin is going to be a good way to do that too. Jonathan S. says, Scion, tabletop RPG, all myths are real, but not all stories are myth. Really goes deep into this. Yeah, I've heard good things about it, but I've not played it directly myself, but it seems like something that would be up my alley. So Andre Nunez says, expecting space combat that can be adapted to fantasy airships easily. I bet so too. And also even naval combat. I think that if whatever we see from this is going to be so useful. Chrysimia says, did they make up Zancutan and Sheldon? I thought they were mad at each other. So they have a very, very complicated relationship in Pathfinder universe. It is, it's super complicated. There's a lot of nuance to it, and the fact that like they do go at odds sometime, but like Sheldon really still cares about her brother and has like a place for him, and like in some instances, Zancutan has like, in some of the lore it says told his priest to like maybe like go a little easier on Sheldon temples than like other do-gooder temples that are interfering with them, and so there's this uneasy tension, despite the fact that he flayed their father and turned their father into a horrific herald of his, that really shows that they have family drama that is beyond what you would expect from a mortal family, but kind of fits in with the family drama that you would expect from gods. Jack Spade says siblings are always mad at each other, but then sometimes have each other's back. No one else insults them but me. Yeah, I got that vibe out of them. Definitely. It's just, it's more like writ on an epic mythical scale beyond mortal comprehension than a normal sibling issue when it involves flaying their father into a horrifically, constantly pained herald. But that's because that's what deities are. They're this larger-than-life version of ourselves that kind of represents something that's more extreme than what, like, a non-deity would do. Jonathan S. said the same thing in chat, that divine drama, family drama is on a different plane. Absolutely. So, this is all super awesome, and we've been on here for 2 hours talking about this. We did a full analysis on here that, like, I might try to figure out how to clip and do, like, a clip video for people who, like, don't care about our little chats that we've been having here together in chat, but more want to be like, let's look at Mark's read-through and analysis of just the document. So if I may go into that and do that and make a video for that, but I think we made it pretty far here. I'm going to see if anybody else has something that you want to talk about or a question you'd like to ask me to try to speculate based on what we've all seen so far. But if not, I'll leave you with just, we're very excited about the possibilities on this for Roll for Combat, and we're 100% behind supporting the Starfinder 2nd Edition compatibility with Pathfinder 2nd Edition in our products. Roll for Combat, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, Steven started it with Starfinder, right? As soon as Starfinder came out, he was like, heck yeah, and he made a actual play called Roll for Combat of Starfinder Adventure Path. And the very first product that was ever released by Roll for Combat as a published product was the Loot Box of Wonder by Thurston Hillman for Starfinder. So we're very excited to put out products that will work for Starfinder as well. And a question Wyvern is wondering, what would be the implications of the August 2025 start date for Starfinder 2e organized play on the release date? That's a very good question, Equestrian Wyvern. And in order to answer that question, I think what we need to think about is we need to think about what we saw in the stream today. And what we saw in the first page of the document. If you remember when I was doing a close read of the document from Pathfinder Remaster, one of the things I noted was that I read the entire introduction aloud. I parsed all of the things they said, and then I saw who signed that document, and one of the people who signed it was a new, not announced designer at Paizo, Improfit. Joshua Birdsong is now was a designer at Paizo in that. On the Starfinder field test, you can see that it says signed the Starfinder team, and it has the 3 members who have traditionally been on the Starfinder team all along. Thurston Hellman, Jenny Jajotsky, and Dustin Knight, and Jessica Catalan, Starfinder Society developer. Now, normally, like in the past, there was an organized play team that would have had the Starfinder Society developer and the Pathfinder Society developer that was part of the narrative team. But it looks like the Starfinder Society developers on the Starfinder team now, which could mean either that it's a multi-class being on 2 teams or that it's a move. Either way, having them being specifically on the team as opposed to being on a different team and interfacing and embedded with the team, which is how it usually, I think, used to work back when I was at Paizo, where that position was always going to the meetings with the Starfinder team, and but was on a different team. That could allow for closer integration and potentially like working together to handle this. And Dustin says current year 6 lasts until May, which point year 7 begins and goes until May 2025. A short break follows, and the new edition of the organized play program will begin in August 2025 at Gen Con. So Dustin has all the real details right here for us. So I was just speculating based purely on the signatures that were listed there that they were cooking something up that would involve close integration based on the teams, and Dustin gives the exact details to answer your question, Equestrian Wyvern. There you have it. Jack says, what genre of third-party worlds or universes would you like to see be added into Starfinder with this new announcement? Honestly, I think that just like it's so much potential, so easy. Oh, the answer to the information is the Starfinder playtest fact. I wonder if that site is no longer like a denial of service site that I can't get to open. No, it's still not opening for me. But someday I will be able to open that page instead of having it just not load because everybody is going there. Oh, well, actually, you know what? The fact worked. But the front page didn't work, but the fact worked. And that fact looks like it has a bunch of questions here. So you know what? I was about to say that we could potentially stop soon, but now we have all of this additional material that we were going to look at. And it actually answered some of the questions people asked, like why publish a new edition? And it said that they want to use... Oh, I think that was in terms of like why not just keep with Starfinder First Edition, which I think nobody necessarily... was asking there. There's just so many innovations in that can be used here that I think that's pretty clear. Obviously, a lot of people will ask it. Just no one on the stream asked that so far. And it says, I don't want to change. And someone said, and the answer is you don't have to. We made the decision not to release Hidden Nyanite Swords to enter your home to consume your first edition books. Note that they couldn't say they weren't going to send anyone to take your books after the current environment with there actually being a company in the field that is doing that now. Oh, no. Then the question, is Starfinder in trouble? Not at all. Yeah, no, definitely not. If they were actually in trouble, there's no way you would put in the effort to make a new edition. They would just, like, stop doing it. It says, didn't you say Starfinder Enhanced wasn't a playtest for second edition? And it said, we did. It's its own product. It was always intended to be its own thing. For first edition games, it's not a stealth playtest. Will this use the Orc license? Yes. Well, I guess that was pretty obvious to us since we were seeing that in the stream. What is this open playtest? It's the plan for summer 2024. Why announce so early? To make it as open as possible. What products can we expect? It says the second edition playtest rulebook in summer 2024. What are the field tests? They are snippets of work to make the new edition. Are not intended to be fully working playtests, but small segments of different aspects of the game, such as the one that is out now. What is the scope of playtesting? It's going to focus on what we see as being key components to Starfinder. Since it's fully compatible with PF2, that base engine is tried and tested. It can focus on critical elements like classes, item-based equipment system, new skills, updated relevant rules for Starfinder, and general testing of gameplay experience with new ancestries, feats, spells, and more. So gameplay, it has things about the Pathfinder rules that we don't need to look at because we don't need a summary of the rules changes. Will there be Starship combat? It says our focus right now is on the core gameplay experience. We know Starship combat is integral to Starfinder. We want to make sure we get these rules right. We'll announce more for plans about that later. So basically, yes, but we're not saying anything yet. Are there going to be different baseline assumptions between them? Yes, it says. Absolutely. Technology is prevalent. Ranged weapons are more plentiful. They can fire many times in a row. Open up ancestries in ways that don't fit Pathfinder's assumption, like innate flight. Yes. So absolutely, it looks like My guess about flight and ranged weapons, which seemed like it was pretty obvious, is very stated in here. It does not say that the environmental assumptions are different, which could mean that they aren't, or it could mean that this was just an example of the assumptions. Will new classes just be old classes in space? And they already said no in the stream, and it says no here as well. Can I play a puppet Solarian with the pirate archetype who keeps a magic sword and a backup rocket launcher? Yes, is the answer to that. So compatibility, will it work with Pathfinder Remaster? Yes. Will it work with Starfinder? Will Pathfinder work with Starfinder 2nd Edition? Yes. They said yes to both of those things. Obviously, like we were saying earlier in the stream, like I was saying and other people in chat, I think we're agreeing, you can make mild changes like the Starfinder low-level flight options you probably don't want to put into your Pathfinder Remaster game unless you more broadly change the Pathfinder Remaster game to use the Starfinder setting assumptions entirely, or else those options are going to kind of kite everything. But that's like one thing that's super easy to adjust by just moving them to the Pathfinder Remaster version. And similarly, when moving Pathfinder Remaster into Starfinder, that's not going to be a problem. They just will be too weak, and you might want to lower the levels for any of those effects. It says, is it compatible with 1st edition? And the answer to that is no, which that was pretty clear. Setting, how does this affect the Starfinder setting? There will be previews of the setting changes, and core Pantheon is going to change up a bit. The old deities are not dead, but they're spotlighting new deities. Is the Starfinder timeline moving forward? Future books will be in line with the current year, kind of what we expected. Will there be a world-shattering event? Yes, quite literally, in fact. Is Golarion coming back? No, but maybe we'll see what's happening with Golarion's mood. Will there be changes to the iconics? Some will be swapped. Chick, formerly a larva and a jar, has all grown up and taken on the mantle of Mystic from Keskadai. Kasatha Solarian Altronus is taking a retreat, is going to be stepping back to make room for a new iconic. Obozai is feeling the sting of age and has shifted her focus to heavy weapons to answer your problems. Not answering all her problems with her axe like Dashko, but uses Dashko as a backup. Will there be changes based on the move to Orc? Some changes will involve housekeeping various setting elements. For Orc, thankfully Starfinder has few elements that fit this category, so most will remain relatively untouched. I assume that means things like Drow, probably. Organized play has its own category, and that's what Dustin was talking about. Will there be organized playtest involvement? There will be adventure content. Supports the playtest won't be specifically for organized play characters, as the campaign won't be out yet. Providing rewards for the remainder of the current edition's campaign. That's kind of like Pathfinder playtests that were provided rewards that you could use anywhere, but it provided rewards that would later be put into your Pathfinder 2 characters. What is the timeline for the remaining seasons? Just what Dustin said. Year 6 until May. Year 7 begins until May 2025. Then a short break, and August 2025 at Gen Con will be Starfinder 2 season, which would be year, I guess, 1 of Starfinder 2. What should we expect from the last season? We have a new First Seeker being elected. The presence will shape the Year 7 storyline as future Starfinder stories. Wrapping up ongoing storylines. How will Starfinder Organized Play change for a new edition? There will be a new program for the new edition. The exact changes are still being worked on. Will the field play test be playtest legal? Since the field tests are considered pre-playtest, and while they're compatible with Pathfinder 2nd Edition, are not intended for play in Organized Play, they will not be eligible for use. So that is all of the additional information that was in the FAQ, and thanks to Dustin for pointing out that there's a way to get to that without having to go on the front page, which is still denial of service for me, by going just directly to the FAQ page, which is not. So let's see if there were any big comments to that, because I kind of just went quickly through the FAQ page while all of you were talking. And let's see. Aaron Mortar mentioned would love a superhero game running on the Finder system. Yeah, I mean, this shows that you could do that. I can just imagine you have like a brick superhero and a wizard and a Solarian just like all teaming up. You could definitely do that. And this is going to give us a good example of how it could be done with a differing setting expectations and assumptions, just like they mentioned in there. And Dead Phoenix said, they said the new playtest classes are from Pathfinder, but they say that the new classes weren't in Starfinder. They said that they aren't ones that are originally from Pathfinder 1E. They didn't, but I don't think they did. I think they said they were new though, so I think that That could be them being cagey and tricky, but I think it probably means they're brand new classes. I highly doubt that like they're just gonna just suddenly do Witch Warper in the Pathfinder book. I just don't think that is correct, but it is an interesting guess that has been made in chat. Ollie writes, it might be fun to have a Pathfinder party, have a teleport accident, end up in a Starfinder scenario. Exactly. You can use time traveling as just a way to time travel into the possible future of Starfinder, which is like, you know, one of the settings, many different futures, or time travel back into the past. The gap could be something, although with the setting shaking event, maybe something is going to change with the gap. Because the gap, I assume, means that, like, if you were able to go into the timeline of the gap, you would be able to reveal a lot of information. So it's possible that time travel just kind of skips around it. Kind of like, you know, going curved. Like what in Rise of the Rune Lords, there was like a giant barrier that you didn't notice it, but you would kind of go around the city and just be walking in a bubble, and you thought you were going in a straight line, but you were going in a circle that avoided the area that was warded by magic. Maybe the gap does something like that with time travel. Who knows? And Twigster said it would be cool if the last adventure path for SF1 is called Closing the Gap. And, like, I don't think so, because I feel like having the fundamental mystery of the gap kind of is part of the setting, and they did say that Galarian's not coming back. But maybe. They said that it's going to be a literal setting-shaking event. So we don't know what that's going to be. We won't know until we find out more. It's incredibly exciting. There's many possibilities. And now that we read out that FAQ, I think we have... Unless there's another page that's behind that front page that isn't loading, then I think we've read out all the details. We've speculated everything that I can think of here. And I hope you enjoyed this speculation and detail drop emergency stream that I rushed to get out for all of you without Steven. And Steven was telling me that he's going to try to do something else later, I think. So I don't know if that is something that's for sure or not. Let me take a look to see if it is. Like, I don't see it right now, but you may want to keep an eye on the Roll for Combat stream, and if I see anything later, I will update everyone. I'll probably like make a post somewhere or something to talk about it. People are saying the gap seems to be a multi-directional memory bubble of some sort, and helps games have their own lore without worrying about constant continuity. Absolutely. And Swixter says, when SF2 is launched and has SFS scenario for it, can I play a Pathfinder 2 class in that scenario? They didn't say. That was not answered. I feel like there are some questions they're going to have to think about with that, especially in terms of the fact that archaic weapons, like if you played your Pathfinder Society character with archaic weapons, they would do like 10 less damage to everything that had non-archaic armor. But before, they could never do that, right? But now, even if they wanted it to be something that was kind of rare so that they focused on Starfinder options, it could be like total speculation, it could be like an incredibly rare boon that was like, yeah, you're a time traveler and you're playing with Pathfinder stuff. Or they could open it up wider than that. I don't know. It's completely... the sky is the limit. Everything is... Or space is the sky's not even the limit. What am I saying? Everything's very exciting here. We're excited at Roll for Combat to support this in every way possible moving forward by making all of our options something that Starfinder 2 is going to be able to use as well. So look out for us to try to work with that. It looks like it's just these setting assumptions that are different. So we could have a very small amount of necessary text to allow you to use it in both places seamlessly. And Twigster says, kineticist in space. Oh yeah, that's going to be great. I could also see like an Eldamon trainer in space going to different planets that have like different Eldamon that are on that planet. Plus there's a space element that isn't out in the first Eldamon book, but I'm sure would be cool in space. So I'm excited by all the possibilities. They're endless. Thanks for joining me and for dealing with OBS being a little bit weird today. Never done it with YouTube. I don't know why it was being nasty with YouTube. I'm gonna stop streaming like pretty much here. But before I do, I will put one more link again to the Kickstarter for it's here or on the more convenient Kickstarter.rollforcombat.com is currently active. We are doing great. We have almost 1,000 backers right now for World of Battle Zoo Indigo Isles. We're like 3 away from 1,000. I'll do an update for our 1,000th backer very soon. And it's cool. If you haven't seen it yet at all, then you should check it out. Even if you pledge on the lower levels, you can submit an island idea, and I will write an island based on your idea if you are one of the ones that's selected as one of the top best islands that are in there. We made that a little different because it's not only people who pledge like a very high amount that get an island. Anyone can if they're selected from among those islands, just because we like the idea of letting everyone be part of the design team and part of the process. And these islands are a small island, they're an archipelago you can add to any campaign setting if you want. There's 8 ancestries and also heritages for Leshy and Sprite ancestry that are new because they're like the 10 most common ancestries or them plus dragons are the 11 most common ancestries in that setting. Humans, elves, dwarves, on these islands, you don't really find them there. It's all like these parrot people and rock people and sprites and leshies and these Ashutl people that are called Zodal or Shuttle. I don't know how to pronounce the ancestry name. It's probably like Ashutl, so it's probably Shuttle. And Fae and all sorts of other things that live there. So you can check it out. I'm just saying it here at the end. But I didn't want to like interrupt by saying it a lot of times in the middle. Take care, everyone. Get hyped for Gen Con and for Starfinder.